But all right, so as you guys know, over the summer I got to go to Greece and Israel, and it was a lot of fun. We had quite the adventures between migraines and flying issues and people falling in the ocean. Lots of issues, but it was a lot of fun. It's not a trip unless you have at least 2 near-death experiences, and we definitely got our near-death experiences in. Missiles flying overhead. It was a great time. So as we go through what we're going to try and do with this series, I've got a whole bunch of pictures that I'm going to try and walk through. It's not by any means all the pictures I took. They're just kind of representative, some pictures. I think when you, at least for me, when you picture different Bible stories, you picture very often things in books that you have seen or read as a kid or movies that you saw a long time ago. And for me, at least, a lot of it is kind of cartoonish because I read cartoonish type books. And so I think there's a good value in realizing that these aren't just cartoonish places, but these are real places and real people. And that's the big takeaway from a trip like this, is it just kind of solidifies some of those, well, this is real stuff. And these are people who really lived. And there's people today, 2,000 years later or more in the case of Israel, that are living in the same places, sometimes in very similar lifestyles. It's just an interesting experience. I think sometimes you don't have to go on a trip like this to have faith. I think that's ridiculous if anybody says anything like that. But the value of a trip like this is that it does kind of reframe some of the way you picture things, and it reframes, it just gives you a better understanding. Because you read through passages, narrative passages especially, like in the book of Acts, and you see that Paul goes this place to this place to this place, and it can be like 3 words away in a sentence, but in reality, it's like a month of travel. Like it's a hard thing to even comprehend and wrap your head around, because we don't know the distance between Neapolis and Philippi today. Today we're going to talk about Neapolis and Philippi. But when you go there and you have even, as cushy as we had it, we're riding in a big charter bus to all these places. But it does give you an appreciation just for how rough the terrain was, just how difficult a journey it would be. I'm trying to imagine doing that by foot. It's just nuts, especially when Paul spends a lot of time up in the north part of Greece, and then he goes down south into Greece and does that by foot at least once. That is a difficult trip. Greece has mountains, and I knew Greece had mountains, but I had no idea Greece had mountains like that. And so we're going to just go over and discuss some of those things. If you got questions at any point, I probably don't know the answer, but that's okay. I'll tell you something. And again, as we go through, keep in mind, very often if you ever do a trip like this or whatever, especially if you have like a tour guided type trip, somebody will say to you, well, this is the spot that XYZ happened. 9 times out of 10, they're going to be way overstating their case. And it's probably not the spot that this happened. There are some exceptions, and we will look at some of those as we go throughout the class, where we know that this is the spot that this happened, which is really cool. But other than that, you may not know that this is the spot, but you may say, well, this is the area that this happened, or this is the city that this happened, and well, yeah, that is 100% accurate. So we know Paul goes to Philippi, and we're going to look at the supposed jail of Philippi today. Is that the jail? Maybe, maybe not. Was Paul in a jail in Philippi, in the city that we're looking at? Yes, and you can know that for sure. And so whether this is the exact location right here and you touch it or not, it doesn't matter all that much. But we do know is that if it's not here, it was very nearby and in a place very much like this. And so kind of keep those things in mind as we go. So let's just start, and we'll bore all of you at the very beginning with a brief history of Greece. So what I want to do today, I want to just give you a real quick overview of the history of Greece. I think we have probably a little bit better understanding of like the history of Israel, because so much of the Old Testament talks about those things. But when we're thinking back on these places from a modern perspective, there's been a lot of history that's happened since before Paul went to Greece and after Paul has gone to Greece. And so going there today, you're going to see a lot of stuff that wasn't there, came after Paul, and you might see some things that came before Paul. And so having a timeline is really kind of a big deal, just trying to figure out some of these things. So we're going to do just a very brief overview of the history of Greece. We'll talk about Neapolis, which if you look on a map today, you won't find Neapolis anywhere, but it's the modern city of Kavala. And then we'll talk about Philippi, which I don't think there is a modern city of Philippi. It's just the ancient city. So, history of Greece. In Greece, you have a couple major regions that show up and are discussed, especially in the book of Acts. Achaia is one that you've probably heard. Macedonia, obviously you're probably pretty familiar with that one, with the whole Macedonian call. There's mention of Thrace in the Bible. There's mention of Dalmatia in the Bible. Dalmatians. But Dalmatia is a region of Greece. Crete is a region of Greece. All these are places that when you read through your Bible, you're like, okay, Paul goes into Achaia. I have no idea what that means and no frame of reference for what that is. Because Achaia is not a city, it's a region, but I don't even necessarily, before this trip, I couldn't draw you a line of where Achaia is in Greece. I knew it was a rough area, but all that kind of stuff. And so just having these kind of visualizations when you read through the Bible, it really helps you kind of get an understanding and an appreciation for what all is going on. So this is a map of Greece. There's a really good website I found today that was going through and talking about a good website full of maps, and you can do different stuff and good quality. So that's it, viz.bible, if you want to play around with some maps. But this is a big scale picture of Paul's second missionary journey. And this is a lot of land, right? Like a lot of land. So Israel is roughly the size of Tennessee, right? And so it would go down here up to like right here. So imagine that's a Tennessee, if you want to think in units of Tennessee. That's a long distance that Paul's traveling. And so as the mission begins, let me see, can you see my mouse? So he goes from all the way up here, goes up here. This is Antioch in Syria, which is like kind of Paul's sponsoring church. He comes back, touches base here a lot. He goes down here. This is Galatia, southern Galatia in particular. If you're in church on Sunday morning, who does Paul pick up in southern Galatia? Timothy, yeah. And so as soon as Paul picks up Timothy, we'll read these verses in a little bit, but he has plans to go to Asia, and then he gets that Macedonian call. And so he goes from here all the way up to Troas, which is a big port city, and then he hops on a boat, goes to Samothrace, which is a little island city, and then to Neapolis is where he first sets foot in Europe. And then you see that dot right there. It's not labeled just because it's so close, but that dot is Philippi. So we're going to, as we go throughout this class, it's not going to be necessarily the order that we did our trip in, but we're going to go in the order that kind of follows Paul's missionary journey some. But that's the map of Greece. But understanding just these regions is important too, because Macedonia is this upper area right here of Greece. It's very northern Greece, and there's a big history there. You have Alexander the Great, who is a name you're probably familiar with, but may not know a ton about. You got, in your ancient history, the Greek city-states are down in what's more traditional. I have a hard time seeing it with the glare. Down in Achaia and this sort of area. You got Corinth here. Sparta would be like there. Sparta's up here, I think. You got Athens, you got Derbe, and lots of those cities around there in that place of Achaia, which is mentioned in the Bible. The classical Greek city-states would have viewed Macedonia as like backwoods hillbillies. And Macedonia was they'd snub their nose at Macedonia up until Alexander the Great came, really Alexander's dad. Then you have the region of Thrace, which is kind of this land up here that is even considered by the Macedonians as like uncivilized, heathens. And so just the further north you get, the more barbarian you are. But Thrace is an important place, especially in history. This region over, I'm having a hard time seeing my own mouse. This western region of Greece is Dalmatia. Who goes to Dalmatia in the Bible? Paul doesn't go there, but who does? Paul talks about it when he is writing 2 Timothy. Titus. Yeah, Titus goes to Dalmatia. Titus also goes down here to the island of Crete. What do you know about Cretians? They're all liars, right? Paul quotes a Greek play that says, Cretians are liars and that kind of stuff. And so there's a lot of history here, and there's a lot of geography that really makes a big difference when you try and visualize everything that's happening in the stories of Acts. And so just having a rough understanding really helps. We'll go back to this map throughout this entire time, and so you'll learn it, or you won't. Do what? There will be a quiz. If you fail, you're excommunicated. Apologize in advance. So just some history of Greece. Greece is really, in a lot of ways, the birthplace of Western thought. Obviously, Christianity and Judaism and Jerusalem are going to be very significant in this as well. But when you think about Western thought and Western philosophy, a huge amount of it comes from Greece, especially in the ancient world. And so there's going to be a big push on where does the whole notion of individualism come into play in human history? Because when you think about a lot of cultures in the world, we are a very individualistic culture, and everything's about me as an individual. I want to find personal fulfillment, personal happiness, and all that kind of stuff. That's not how a lot of the world thinks. A lot of people think in a communal sense, and especially in the ancient world. But a lot of that individualism comes from Greece. Rationalism, democracy obviously comes from Athens. All those sorts of things are really big. You got a lot of ancient philosophers who show up. You may know some of these names, may not know what all they're about, but Socrates, who basically drove everybody insane because he asked them, but why? Over and over and over again until people wanted to kill him. What do you believe? Well, I believe that, the sun is bright. Well, why do you believe that the sun is bright? Well, because it is. Well, why? But why? But why? And so eventually he just drove people so mad that they killed him. Plato is all about the world of forms. And so Plato says that, for every idea has a, perfect form that's in the heavens. And, Platonism is really important, especially when you talk about math, modern day math. Aristotle puts things into categories. And so if you think about modern taxonomy with animals and how do you categorize animals, that's a lot of Aristotle stuff. Diogenes is about cynicism, so being a skeptic and not taking things at face value. Zeno is stoicism, which is basically the idea of I'm not going to let my emotions control me, I'll let my rational mind control me, that kind of thing. Epicurus is all about hedonism, do the thing that increases the most pleasure for me. Anyway, all of these things it doesn't matter too much, but these guys are very important in just the history of the world, and also their thoughts are really important because Paul's going to wrestle with these people. When Paul goes to the Areopagus in Athens, who does he argue with? He's arguing with Stoics, Zeno, and Epicureans. Epicurus. And so these are people that are going to have direct conversations with Paul. And the way Paul does his ministry in Athens is these people are hundreds of years before Paul lived, but Paul's going to be wrestling with their ideas, and we still today are wrestling with their ideas and that sort of thing. Then just some important history, like political history. You have all these different city-states. You probably know some of them, Athens and Corinth and Sparta and all that kind of stuff. They hate each other. They fight all the time. It's ridiculous. That will end with Alexander the Great's dad, a guy named Philip II of Macedon, and he would unite these various states. Then he would die, and then his son Alexander would take over, and Alexander takes over the world. Flipping your Bibles, look at Daniel chapter 11. There's a prophecy that is really pretty explicitly about Alexander the Great, and even people who are not Bible-believing scholars say this is about Alexander the Great. And so those people will say, well, this must have been written after Alexander the Great, but there's good reason that it's not. Anyway, getting sidetracked. But in Daniel chapter 11, you have this prophecy about Alexander. And he says, now I will show you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings shall arise in Persia. The 4th shall be far richer than all of them. And when he has become strong through his riches, he shall stir up all against the kingdom of Greece. Then a mighty king shall arise, who shall rule with great dominion and do as he wills. And as soon as he has arisen, his kingdom shall be broken and divided into 4 winds of heaven, but not to his posterity, nor according to the authority with which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be plucked up and go to those others besides these. And that's exactly what happens with Alexander. So he comes on the scene and in 30-some years conquers basically the entire known world, and then he dies really quickly when he's like, I think 32, I want to say. And his heir is assassinated, so his son doesn't become king, but it's divided amongst his generals. And then Daniel goes on to talk about all that. But Alexander's really important because what he does is everywhere that he goes, he Greekifies the places. And he spreads Greek culture and Greek philosophy, Greek religion, all throughout these places. And Greek religion becomes syncretized with all these local religions. And so you see that with like Baal in Canaan becomes associated with Zeus, because Baal is the king of the gods in the Canaanite religion, and so Zeus is king of the gods in the Greek religion, so they must be the same. Most famously, you see that with like the Romans, where Jupiter essentially just becomes a carbon copy of Zeus later on and that sort of thing. And so you see that this is going to spread throughout all the world. Alexander brings the Greek culture, Greek language, Greek religion, Greek philosophy, everywhere that he goes. And when you come upon the world of the New Testament, what language are they speaking? Greek, right? The New Testament's written in Greek because of Alexander the Great. And so we got to go to the tomb of Alexander's dad, which is really cool. Alexander the Great's tomb is lost to history. It's probably in Alexandria, Egypt, probably under the water. Some people think that it's there. But we found the tomb of his dad was found in the, I think, 1970s. And so they erected this massive tomb, and then they immediately buried it. And so it was not looted, and like the painting on the top's still intact, and you can kind of see it. Maybe not so much great in that picture. This was the armor of Alexander's dad, which is really cool. Alexander's dad was he was king 26 years, I think, somewhere around that. And he was on the front lines of the battlefield almost every single one of those years. And a lot of people write about he had a severe limp from a war injury. And if you look, you might not quite be able to tell it from the picture, but one of his greaves, these shin things, is taller than the other because his legs were messed up, which is really cool. I'm going to say cool a lot. This is his quiver for like his arrows. Like, just imagine the wealth and the skill and the money to make something like that without modern tools. Pretty crazy. This is his shield, which is a picture, I think, of Hercules or Achilles. I think it's Hercules. Hercules or Achilles, one of them, on his shield that they found. And this is his bone box. And so his body was cremated, but they couldn't get fires hot enough to like truly cremate bodies like you can today. And so you'd have like lots of bone shards and stuff. And so they just kind of sweep it into a box. And his bones and bone dust was in that box for...
It's called the bone box?
Yeah, the ossuary. But yeah. And then that was the wreath that they put on his head when they cremated him. And you can tell because the gold is kind of melted if you look real close, which is kind of cool. Anyway, that was a cool thing that we did. I thought that one was really fun. Those are all the stuff that they used to bury him. Because once it touched the king, it was considered sacred. So anyway. But as Philip II unites Greece, then Alexander takes Greece and brings it to the rest of the world. Alexander dies, the kingdom split. Rome comes sweeping in not too long later and conquers everything. Then Rome divides Western Empire. The Eastern Empire is the Byzantine Empire, which I'll talk about Byzantine stuff quite a bit. That just means like that later Eastern Roman Empire. And then Constantinople falls to the Turks. Istanbul, Constantinople. And then in 1821, there's a big Greek War of Independence. They become the modern nation. And then, of course, the Ottoman Empire falls in World War I. So anyway, if you don't get all that right, there will be a quiz, and it has consequences. So, but that's just a very brief overview. And the reason why that's important is because a lot of the stuff that we'll see dates maybe either later, especially Byzantine. The Byzantine Empire was a Christian empire, and so they would very often build churches on sites that are important historically. And so just about everywhere you go that there's a church site, a biblical site, there's going to be a either Catholic or Orthodox Byzantine style church built there. And so if you see stuff like that, the Byzantine Empire comes around in the 300s. That's not too far removed from the memories of people. And so that's just several generations of, oh yeah, Paul was here and this is where this happened. And so there's time there, but there's pretty good indication that there's probably something significant that might have happened here. So let's talk about Neapolis. Turn your Bibles, Acts chapter 16. Acts 16. So Paul goes on the second missionary journey. At the very beginning of it, he goes up through southern Galatia, picks up Timothy. Verse 6, though, as they went through the region of Phrygia and Galatia, having been forbidden by the Holy Spirit to speak the word in Asia, when they had come up to Mysia, they attempted to go into Bithynia, but the Spirit of Jesus did not allow them. So passing by Mysia, they went down to Troas, and a vision appeared to Paul in the night. A man of Macedonia was standing there, urging him, saying, "Come over to Macedonia and help us." And Paul had seen the vision. Immediately we sought to go to Macedonia, concluding that God had called us to preach the gospel to them. And so Paul has great plans to go into Asia and to go Bithynia and all that sort of stuff. But then God says, no, you need to go to Macedonia. You need to go to northern Greece. And so Paul says, okay, I guess I'll scrap all these plans that I got and we're going to Greece. Which that's a crazy thing to do, right? Like, there's a lot of planning that would go into this trip, I imagine. And to just suddenly say, all right, we're going a completely different direction. When Paul left Antioch, I bet he probably told him, hey, I'm not planning on going to Greece. I'm planning on going to Asia. And now sudden plans change, and all the people back there, he can't just call them, tell them where he's going. You'd have to send somebody back to go tell them. And so anyway, he decides we're going to Greece. And so he gets on a boat, goes up to Troas, goes by the way of Samothrace, and then lands in Neapolis. So pick up verse 11. So setting sail from Troas, we made a direct voyage to Samothrace, and the following day to Neapolis, and from there to Philippi, which is a leading city of the district of Macedonia and a Roman colony. And we remained in that city some days. So Neapolis, the name probably tells you what it is, new city. It's very heavily associated with Philippi, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But it's a port city, and it's about 10 miles away, right there on the Mediterranean Sea. And there's a really, really significant road that goes through North Greece called the Via Ignatia, or Via Ignatia, if you want to say it like that. But it's this major, major roadway that Paul would have traveled. And it connects a lot of those cities that Paul goes to. Like it connects Neapolis to Philippi, and Philippi to Thessalonica, and to Berea, and to all these other places. And so there's this really, it's a new city because it was built to help Philippi. It's the first place Paul goes, and that's all you know about it. It's really not that significant a place in the Bible. And when we got there, there's really not a huge amount of archaeological significance there. Paul landed there, and that's about it. But it is a really pretty city. So there we go. Whoop. Yeah, so that's the trek he goes from Troas to Samothrace, Samothrace to Neapolis, and then Philippi is real close there to Neapolis. So this is the view from the modern coastline of Neapolis. Really pretty. The tinting on it's kind of weird because I took the picture through a tinted window on a bus. But really pretty. So I don't know where exactly Paul landed, but he saw that view pretty much and saw those mountains. Mountains don't change that much. So this is like I said, anywhere that something is alleged to have happened, there's going to be something built there. And so this is the proposed site where Paul first stepped foot. And you can kind of see that picture played out in that mosaic. So Paul's sitting down there in Troas or wherever, I guess, and the angel, the Macedonian, comes and says, "Come here, Paul." And so he gets on the boat and he's stepping foot right there. And so is that the place that Paul first stepped in Greece? Probably not. But did Paul step foot in Greece in that city? Yes. And so, kind of cool. Yeah. Do what? I love a good mosaic. That's going to be a common theme. I love a mosaic. But really pretty city. That castle at the top dates to like the Ottoman Empire. So, not too... our tour guide would say all the time, it's like, "Oh, that's Ottoman Empire, very recent." And we're like, "The Ottoman Empire? That was like 500 years ago. That's older than our country." She's like, "Nah, very recent, not important." Yeah, we have old things like the Grand Canyon, is what she said. There was some fun with our tour guide. But that's the city of Neapolis. There really wasn't much there. We were only there for just like 30 minutes or so, maybe an hour. But really pretty. Smelled like dead fish.
Does that sign say the Bible City or the Blue City? I can't read.
It's the Blue City.
Blue City.
Yeah.
I thought it said Bible.
Yeah, the Blue City. So then from Neapolis, Paul goes to Philippi, and Philippi is a much, much more significant city. Largely, people know it because the book of Philippians is written to the church at Philippi. So let's just go ahead and read this a little bit. Acts 16, pick up verse 12. From there to Philippi, which is a leading city of the district of Macedonia, a Roman colony, we remained in this city some days. And on the Sabbath, we went out of the gate to the riverside, where we supposed there was a place of prayer, and we sat down and spoke to the women who had come together. One who had heard us was a woman named Lydia in the city of Thyatira, a seller of purple goods who was a worshiper of God. The Lord opened her heart to pay attention to what was said by Paul, and she was baptized in her whole household as well. She urged us, saying, "If you have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, Come to my house and stay." And she prevailed upon us. And as we were going to the place of the prayer, we were met by a slave girl who had a spirit of divination and brought her owners much gain by fortune telling. She followed Paul and us, crying out, "These men are servants of the Most High God, who proclaim to you the way of salvation." And this she kept doing for many days. And Paul, having become greatly annoyed, turned and said to the spirit, "I command you in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her." And it came out of her that very hour. And when her owners saw that their hope of gain was gone, they seized Paul and Silas and dragged them into the marketplace before the rulers. And when they had brought them to the magistrates, they said, "These men are Jews. They're disturbing the city. They advocate customs that are not lawful for us Roman citizens, for us Romans to accept or practice." The crowd joined in attacking them. The magistrates tore their garments off of them and gave orders to beat them with rods. And when Paul had inflicted many blows, when they had inflicted many blows upon them, they threw them into prison, ordering the jailer to keep them safely. Having received this order, he put them into the inner prison and fastened their feet in the stocks. About midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the prisoners were listening to them, and suddenly there was a great earthquake, so that the foundations of the prisons were shaken. And immediately all the doors were opened, and everyone's bonds were unfastened. And the jailer woke and saw the prison doors were open. He drew his sword and was about to kill himself, supposing that the prisoners had escaped. But Paul cried with a loud voice, "Do not harm yourself, for we are all here." And the jailer called for lights and rushed in, trembling with fear, for he fell down before Paul and Silas. Then he brought them out and said, "Sirs, what must I do to be saved?" And he said, "Believe in the Lord Jesus, and you will be saved, you and your household." And they spoke the word of the Lord to him and all who were in his house. And he took them the same hour of the night and washed their wounds, and he was baptized at once, he and his family. And they brought them into his house, set food before them. He rejoiced along with his entire household that he had believed in God. But when it was day, the magistrates sent the police, saying, "Let those men go." And the jailer reported these words to Paul, saying, "The magistrates have sent to let you go. Therefore, come out now and go in peace." And Paul said to them, "They have beaten us publicly, uncondemned men who are Roman citizens, and have thrown us into prison. And do they now throw us out secretly? No. Let them come themselves and take us out." The police reported these words to the magistrates, and they were afraid when they heard it that they were Roman citizens. They came and apologized to them and took them out and asked them to leave the city. So they went out of the prison and visited Lydia, and when they had seen their brothers, they encouraged them and departed. So that's Paul's time in Philippi, at least during the second missionary journey. He's going to make another brief visit there. But there's a lot of interesting things that happen here. So Philippi, the city, is a major city in Macedonia, that northern part. It's on a major roadway. It was originally named, I plan to have all of these come up at once, but you guys can just read it. Crinides, but it was renamed Philippi after Philip II, who's like the local legend, right? Philip II would have died quite a while before that, several hundred years. But to honor the Greeks and the Macedonians, they named it after Philip because he's our guy. He's the guy who united Greece. It became a Roman colony under Augustus after the assassins of Julius flee there, and you got the Battle of Philippi. So Julius Caesar is assassinated by Brutus and Cassius et tu, Brute. Obviously Brutus and Cassius, they did it with probably the support of the government, but then they were immediately like the scapegoats, and so because everybody wanted Caesar dead. And so they get betrayed after killing Caesar, getting talked into killing him. Then they flee up there, and then Caesar's successor, Augustus, Octavius, and his general, Mark Antony, go up there and kill them. And so big sight. But to reward the veterans of that battle, they give the lands and the city to those veterans. And so it becomes a very significant colony full of Roman veterans, which is a really tough group of people, right? Not your everyday person is a Roman veteran. Those are people that have fought and they're trained and they're grizzled, gnarly kind of guys. That's a major population there in Philippi. And so when Paul goes to Philippi and there's the perception that he's stirring up trouble, they got no problem about a little bit of violence, right? That's kind of what you'd expect. And again, all of that happened very shortly before Paul got here, right? Paul's arriving there 100 years or so later. This is not that long in the grand scheme of things. And so, those kind of cultures die hard. But Philippi, what was really interesting about the time in Philippi that we had was there's not a modern city of Philippi built right on top of the ancient city of Philippi. Quite a few of the places you go, there's going to be a modern city built right on top of the ancient city. And so you can't really do a lot of archaeology because people are living there. Thessalonica was a really good example because you have the ancient city. They discovered like the main part of it, the big marketplace, but they'd only half excavated it because literally on the other side was an apartment building. So you just can't kick people out. Anyway, so every Roman city that you're going to run into, it's going to be super, super common that you'll have in a Roman polis, which is like an official designation for cities. You're going to have an agora or a marketplace, and you're going to have entertainment like an odeum, a big theater. You're going to have public bathhouses. You're going to have gymnasium, where like people go to work out naked because that's what the Greeks and the Romans did. You're going to have all of that kind of stuff in a city like this. And when you look at it, it's very much a city. And so like this is the theater there at Rome, there at Philippi. And like this is very likely the kind of place, I don't know exactly when this dated. I think this dates to the time of Paul. But like, this is what you expect. And it looks very much like a modern day theater, right? You got to do plays and, Greeks love their plays and all that kind of stuff there. People would sit up in those bleachers and the acoustics are really cool, really good. And so you have that. This is the agora. And so typically in a city, if it's a huge city, you might have multiple. But in a city this size, you'd only have one. And so I don't know where Paul stood in here, but if Paul spent any time in Philippi at all, which he did, he would have been through the agora. This is the public space. And so all along the agora, right around here type places, you have the remains of little shops where people take I butchered a cow today, I'm taking it to the marketplace, and you go and buy your meat, and there'd be like a little, baker vendor square, and you'd have every little business would have a little booth there in the agora, at least the successful ones. Yeah. Well, we don't do that at all in America, hardly. But yeah, throughout the rest of the world, you have let me go buy dinner for today every single day of your life. And that's what you have here. And so it is kind of Strawberry Festival. Everybody sets up their little booth. And you can get your funnel cakes right there. And Paul loved funnel cakes. That's right there in the Bible. But yeah, and so Paul would have been here and right around, where was it? I think it's probably slightly off camera over here. The prison that Paul would have been in, and I've got a picture of it here in a second, was probably right around here, I think. You can't quite see it, but there's a big statue right here to the goddess Tyche, which is the goddess of luck. Her sister Nike was the goddess of victory. And so there's all these agoras, all these marketplaces are going to be major centers of paganism. And so you have these altars and these temples that would be right there. And so you sacrifice an animal to Apollo. Well, what do you go do with the meat? You go drag it down the road just a little bit and sell it in the marketplace. And so you think about the logistics of some of these issues that Paul's addressing, because this is the heart of Philippi. And when Paul is being beaten, he's probably being beaten in a public place, right? Well, where do you take him? Here. And so I don't know which of those blocks, he was beaten on, but he's probably beaten on one of those blocks right there, which is kind of crazy to think about. So this is a better picture of some of those booths, some of those like vendor stalls that you might see. That's the statue of TK right there. And then just another shot of the Agora. Back here, that big structure over here is a later church that was built on this site. Really big church. Look at these like massive paving stones. There's a bunch of earthquakes and stuff in Greece, and so like these would have all been flat and pretty level. But over the years, all these columns have collapsed and the paving stones have gotten broken and wonky and all that because of earthquakes and that sort of thing. But all of that would have been paved. It would have been, a big bustling city full of people. This is where they think the tomb or the jail of Paul was. That's the picture inside it. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. It fits other jails that have been found from the ancient world and what you'd expect. And so,
Like the whole jail or like
yeah, that's like the whole jail.
how
Yeah,
big is that?
it typically just execute people, but it's really small.
Like it looks really small.
Yeah,
You couldn't walk in it.
yeah. You could probably stand in it. Maybe you might.
Stand in it.
Yeah,
You couldn't like.
it's probably like 3 paces,
Yeah.
something like that. They might have had other jails. There might have been another bigger structure, something like that. I don't know. But this is the traditional site of Paul's imprisonment. And so back then, you don't jail people for long periods of time, right? If somebody's a troublemaker, you just kill them. And so, you don't have life in prison as a sentence back in the day. And so that's very possibly the place that Paul was singing there with Silas. And you look back here, you got kind of the structure around it. Maybe that's where the jailer was stationed, right? Maybe, again, possible, maybe not. This is the Via Ignatia. This is the roadway that connects all these big cities. And so as Paul goes and travels along this road, these are very possibly the blocks Paul walked on. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know if he walked this particular stretch of it. But he would have taken the Via Ignatia as he's traveling these cities to cities because it is rough terrain. And these are good, straight Roman roads. And so, I don't know if that's it in particular, but it is the kind of thing he'd be walking on. And here's some pretty flowers. All throughout Greece, you got lots of poppy plants. So get your opium. But what's really significant about Lydia, though, is she's the first baptism that Paul has in Europe. And so he goes to Philippi, and it's kind of built there on a mountain. I don't know if you can kind of see it. But on the opposite side of that, there's a river that flows called the Zygitis River on the outskirts of it. And there he meets Lydia praying because there's not a synagogue in the city. Probably indicates that there's not Jewish men in the city. Lydia is a worshiper of God, and he baptizes her. And this is the traditional site that Lydia was baptized in. And right outside it is a big church. Whether this is the exact location or not, I don't know. But if it's not here, it's not too far away. You have this big church that's built right outside of it, commemorating this from a long time ago, with nice mosaics. I love a mosaic. But it's just cool to think, if it's not here, it's somewhere nearby. But this is the place that Paul, the first European convert that Paul made, was baptized. What's really interesting, why does Paul not say anything sooner when he's being beaten? Probably to protect this fledgling church, right? They've got enemies, people aren't happy with him, say he's disturbing the peace, and Paul takes the beating so that the church might have a safety net. All right, thank you guys. Next week we'll talk about Thessalonica.